Ever since the 20th century, we've had many ways of watching movies at home. We've had short films or segments of TV shows released on Super 8 film before we moved on to the competing VHS and Betamax. There were some odd ones like the Laserdisc, which would pave the way for the compact disc or CD, video CD, which was mainly used in parts of Europe and Asia, and eventually the DVD, which had better picture quality, digital sound, and interactive menus. Eventually, around 2006, we had newcomers Blu-ray and HD DVD competing for the high-definition home entertainment crown, with the former eventually winning in the end. These days, Blu-ray and DVD still coexist together, alongside the former's more superior extension, 4K Ultra HD. But in between those two, there is one particular extension that used to be the big thing in the early 2010s, but has since faded out, with not many companies making them as often as they used to. I'm of course talking about Blu-ray 3D, the format that lets you watch films in glorious 3D at home, just like at the movie theater. As a collector of Blu-rays myself, less than half of my entire library are Blu-ray 3D versions, and it will be really interesting for me to research this topic. This video will document the rise and the fall of the format, while also bringing awareness to those obscure newer releases released only in some parts of the world. Let's begin. Before we actually get started with Blu-ray 3D, I would also like to talk about the history of 3D films as a whole. So let's talk about that first. Since the release of Buona Devil in 1952, 3D has played a significant role in the movie industry. By the following year, Columbia, Warner Bros., Universal, Disney, and 20th Century Fox were all experimenting with 3D. However, due to issues like synchronization problems and risk of headaches and eye strain, the use of 3D declined. It was largely abandoned in 1954, the last film to be made of that era, Revenge of the Creature, releasing the following year and oddly enough, featuring the debut of Clint Eastwood on screen. 3D made a brief comeback in 1981 with Comin' At Ya, which reignited interest in the format. The 80s saw a trend of third installments of horror films being released in 3D, like Jaws 3D, Friday the 13th Part 3, and Amityville 3D. Despite this, 3D soon became relegated to being used in theme park attractions and IMAX theaters. The early 2000s, however, marked a significant shift in 3D filmmaking. In 2003, James Cameron's Ghosts of the Abyss was one of the first 3D films shot with the reality camera system, followed by Spy Kids 3 Game Over the same year, and Shark Boy and Lava Girl in 2005, where the use of the technology received mixed reviews. Around the same year, digital 3D technology started to emerge, with a theater in Hollywood being the first to be equipped with it, and Disney's Chicken Little being converted to 3D. In January 2008, concert film U2 3D was the first live-action digital 3D film, and the use of it was praised by critics. The following year, films like Monsters vs. Aliens, Coraline, and Avatar brought 3D into the mainstream with unprecedented success, particularly Avatar, which was widely praised for its innovative use of the technology. Since then, 3D has become a mainstay in modern movie theaters ever since, although its popularity has waned in later years. Today, 3D movies are still being produced. However, you'd have to pay attention to their trailers, posters, and even film classification websites for confirmation. With all that out of the way, let's move on to Blu-ray 3D. The 3D specifications for the Blu-ray disc were unveiled on December 17, 2009 by the Blu-ray Disc Association themselves, and in the 2010s, films were slowly starting to come out in this format, mostly attributed to the announcement of 3D televisions and compliant Blu-ray players during 2010's Consumer Electronics Show in January. Of these films released, not only was there the previously mentioned Monsters vs. Aliens and Coraline, but also Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and even some blockbusters like Avatar 2 years before its eventual Blu-ray 3D release, and even Clash of the Titans. They even made a collection of all 4 Shrek movies at the time and made them 3D. Sony also let you watch Blu-ray 3D on your PlayStation 3 thanks to a software update. Later on, they started getting simultaneous releases with regular Blu-rays and DVDs as well. Some of the releases released from that sort of golden era throughout the 2010s surprised me somewhat, like these copies of Guardians of the Galaxy and Transformers Age of Extinction I have. As for certain sequences, they switched to an expanded IMAX ratio. This is neat because they did the IMAX Enhanced feature 7 years before Disney Plus eventually did it, which is very surprising. And unlike the latter sequel, it doesn't feel disorienting with the film constantly switching aspect ratios. Speaking of Guardians, there are also scenes where the visual effects go past the borders of the screen, like when Drax coughs up that yellow liquid after Groot gets him out of it. These reminded me a lot of Ghostbusters 2016, where they made it so that certain elements would go beyond the black bars, and one of the last major sequences also expands its aspect ratio. Another film that did this was the 2014 Michael Bay produced TMNT movie, though the only example I could find was, again, near the end, where Donatello's bow staff goes past the black bars, so it was a bit weaker compared to Guardians. Some films had logo variations exclusive to the 3D releases, mainly those from Disney and Pixar, where the Walt Disney Pictures, or just Disney for later releases, text zooms slightly towards the camera, and the Pixar logo zooms out from its first letter. Sony Blu-ray 3Ds, which came in transparent casing, also had their own special intro that would appear if you played the movie in 3D. While that can be debatable, certain scenes enhanced in 3D can make much more sense, like Despicable Me 1 and 2. In the first film's 2D version, you had no idea what the minions were reaching for during the credits, but thanks to the added depth of 3D, it makes more sense now, since they're competing who can get the farthest towards you, the viewer, before one of them literally eats you alive. In the second film's credits, the scenes of the minions auditioning for their own movie are enhanced and, as a result, much more enjoyable in 3D. There are even Blu-ray 3D releases that contain versions not seen in traditional cinemas, like my copy of Open Season, which is actually based on the IMAX 3D version released in select countries in 2006. You can tell this version apart from the regular version by the fact that there are no supporting cast members shown during the opening of the film, and the team behind this version are in the ending credits. Throughout the decade, releases gradually began to slow down, mainly attributed to the fact that they stopped manufacturing 3D televisions around 2016. That same year, the PlayStation VR launched for the PlayStation 4, and that lets you watch Blu-ray 3D without the need of a 3D TV, except for the PSVR 2, which completely ditched support for it. Speaking of, when the PS4 first came out, you couldn't play Blu-ray 3Ds on it until System Software v1.75, which launched on July 29, 2014, now 10 years ago. Unfortunately, that didn't stop Sony from still thinking you need a PS3, when your PS4 can do that just fine. Why not say that at the back of the case? At least let your customers know. If the PS3 was discontinued in 2017, then why do they say you still need a PS3? Thankfully, the others do not say what kind of player you need to play it, because as long as it has a way to read Blu-rays and do 3D, then it will read just fine, even on the PlayStations. Getting back on track, certain countries did indeed get 3D versions of films not available in the US, like the UK. Disney, for instance, released all of their post-2016 library in 3D over there. Like every Pixar film from Cars 3 to onward, the rest of the MCU's Phase 3, from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 to Spider-Man Far From Home, the later 2 episodes of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, including Solo, and even Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. The live-action remakes of the year even got 3D versions. This all lasted until the Corona hit the world. Universal also released The Secret Life of Pets 2 in 3D there, but not Abominable and Despicable Me 3, which for some reason had its US release cancelled there. I should know, because I have the Steelbook. What's weird about Universal is that the only Blu-ray release of Trolls World Tour they did in the UK was the 3D plus 2D combo pack. Not even a standard Blu-ray release, because that's a US exclusive. It's either this, containing a version that wouldn't work normally unless you had a PSVR, or the DVD. Take it or leave it. While the 2020s took its toll on the world, some companies strangely continued to support Blu-ray 3D releases in the US. Universal released The Croods and New Age there, while Warner Bros. Slightly one-upped them by releasing Wonder Woman 1984, Godzilla vs. Kong, and Dune Part 1. And just then, when all hope seemed lost for Blu-ray 3D, in 2023, Avatar: Way of Water came on the scene, not only coming out on DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, but also Blu-ray 3D, because it came out in 3D in theaters. It has been a good long while since a film on Blu-ray 3D had a wide release like that. And to top it off, they even re-released the first Avatar on Blu-ray 3D, with it being a remastered version, basically 6 months after The Way of Water, while the UK got it 9 months later. Okay, I actually came across this release at an HMV in Liverpool, but I put this to the side in favor of a Spy X Family t-shirt alongside some other movies, all just to keep the ads of Code White off my back. There also have been examples of films released during and past Blu-ray 3D's heyday, but you couldn't get in the US or the UK. That Ratchet & Clank movie that was worse than the game which came out alongside it had a 3D release in France. Smurfs: The Lost Village, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Venom, and even Hobbs & Shaw were released on Blu-ray 3D everywhere except the US and the UK, which makes no sense since these two countries were still making them at this time. Such countries include Germany, the Netherlands, South Korea, Japan, India, and the Nordic countries, just to name a few. The Japanese film Stand By Me Doraemon also got a few Blu-ray 3D releases. Not in its home country, though. Instead, it released in Italy, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Thailand. Dragon Ball Z Resurrection F was the first Japanese film released in IMAX 3D. So you'd think it will get a Blu-ray 3D release in its home country, right? Wrong! It's only some parts of Europe and Hong Kong, similarly to Doraemon. And speaking of, they actually say that a PS4 can be used to play the 3D version, while the other big name companies are still stuck in 2010. But seriously, what is it with Japanese films not having Blu-ray 3D releases in their home country? There even was a 3D version of Alpha and Omega, oh god no, released in Germany, France, Brazil, China, Finland, the Netherlands, Russia, and Sweden. Good thing this didn't come out in the US and the UK, because combining this and 3D will give you eye strain twice as quicker. Belgian studio Enway, known for Fly Me to the Moon, had several foreign 3D releases of their later library, like Son of Bigfoot, The Queen's Corgi, and even Bigfoot Family. Meanwhile, the studio behind that World War II pigeon movie that I watched growing up also had some films released in 3D in other countries, like Space Chimps 2, Zartog Strikes Back, Get Squirrely, and No Malone. Because those exist. You want the 3D version of the film where they go back in time to the first Thanksgiving to get turkeys off the menu? Then you'll have to go to Germany, Australia, Italy, Spain, or Brazil. Those are the places to go. And speaking of the land down under, which gave us Ty the Tasmanian Tiger and Tim Tams, they recently carried on doing 3D releases way past when all the big distributors there stopped doing them. One of them pulled out last year. Such examples include Jumanji, The Next Level, Spider-Man No Way Home, Hotel Transylvania 3, Why, when they were still making them when this released in cinemas, Doolittle, The Boss Baby Family Business, and more recently, The Bad Guys, Minions: The Rise of Gru, and Sing 2. Back in Germany, boutique label Turbine Media have released 3 new Blu-ray 3D releases in conjunction with Universal, with those being Bad Guys, Minions: The Rise of Gru, and Jurassic World Dominion. And if you think your shelf won't accept them because they're German, don't worry, because they have reversible covers that have the English title, so they'll fit right in. Meanwhile, in the country next door, oprócz tych wszystkich, które poprzednio ty mówiłeś, my nie mamy nic innego oprócz tych nowszych od Warner Bros. Back in Japan, they have been doing something unexpected, releasing 4K Ultra HD plus Blu-ray 3D combo packs. And what films have they been releasing like this? The rest of the MCU, of course! That's right! Since 2021, Japan has been releasing nearly the entirety of Phase 4 and 5, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, on these 4K UHD Movie Next bundles. And the only way to tell that they'll be in 3D is by looking at the back of them. Films currently released include Black Widow, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Thor: Love and Thunder, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and more recently, The Marvels. Thankfully, most of these will already have the English audio track, so I can enjoy them just fine without having to learn a new language. I'm half convinced they'll do Deadpool and Wolverine like this next. Fingers crossed and it might come true, I guess. So, what actually happened to Blu-ray 3D recently? Ever since they stopped making 3D televisions, they sort of fell into obscurity. But Blu-ray players with 3D support kept being made for some reason. Like this Panasonic one I have as a backup in case my PS4 dies again. It was manufactured in 2020, meaning there's still a market for players like these. But I know for a fact that they'll stop supporting 3D eventually. If they want to keep selling Blu-ray 3Ds, one suggestion I have is to change their name and use. If a film has recently been shown in 3D at cinemas, they could release these versions under a different name. PlayStation VR Movies. Kind of similar to that PS5 4K Movie Essentials ploy Sony did when the PS5 first launched. These could be rebranded as such to still work on the PSVR, but not the PSVR 2, they need to specify that somewhere. They could also work on your PS3, PS4 without the VR, and also Blu-ray 3D players. The Apple Vision Pro has recently allowed for streaming 3D content from Disney+, including those versions of Marvel films available in those 4K Movie Next packs, and Apple TV. And now there's also AI-powered software that helps you convert any images and videos of your choosing into 3D, which allows you to experience a new dimension in something not previously available like this, or watch a more recent movie that had a 3D release theatrically, but hasn't been released like this since then. Sure, it may not feel like how it was actually converted, but it's something. But alas, with new ways of experiencing 3D content like this could hopefully bring about a new wave of films in 3D at home. And maybe, just maybe, 3D can be relevant again. And my shelf is never full. So I'm also looking out for these specific releases not released in the US and the UK in hopes of adding them to my collection someday. Hold on, I gotta take this. Hello? I missed a foreign release out? There's a Blu-ray 3D version of Garfield's Pet Force? Thanks for watching. I spent the most amount of time working on this video in particular, beating my first one like this out, which took 12 days to create. I spent little over a month writing the script, gathering the assets, and even editing this video. And to quote Gambit from Deadpool and Wolverine,
Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
with videos like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, it really helps, and be sure to check out my other content. And until next time, stay bricky!